Hello, my beautiful friends. I am Laurel Bleadon-Maffei with Illuminating Souls, welcoming you to this episode of Sleepy Bedtime Blessings, a podcast designed to help you rest, relax, and fall asleep, all while deepening in your connection with your beautiful team of angels who love you so. I am an angelic practitioner, a spiritual teacher, and an encourager of souls. And I do this through one-on-one angel sessions, soul mentoring, and a variety of classes designed to inspire your spirit. And you can learn more at my website, illuminating-souls.com, where you can also sign up for my mailing list. And this way, you will be in the know of all that I have coming down the road. I do offer a new class every 6 weeks or so. And so if you're on my mailing list, you'll be in the loop. My classes are usually small in size, anywhere between 4 and 10 people. They take place over Zoom. So if you're ever guided to join one of my classes, you will get to meet other beautiful souls and we'll get a chance to better know each other. So I love connecting with you through this podcast. And I also look forward to getting to know you in other ways as well, perhaps through your own session or one of my classes. But for now, the angels and I are here to help you replenish, to help bring you soothing, comforting energy, to help you come into a beautiful place for resting and for sleep. And if you're listening during your waking hours, then we are here to keep you company as you go about your day. However you choose to listen and whenever you choose to listen, it is truly a blessing and an honor to be here with you. As I record this, it is early morning. That's usually when I record these episodes because the world around me is quieter. If I try to record these later in the day, there's more noise. But I am someone who has come to love early morning. There is a sweetness to it. And this is really compatible with bedtime as well. Because I don't know about you, but I have a hard time falling asleep when there's a lot of noise or activity around me. And so listening to a sleep podcast has really become an invaluable strategy for my bedtime. It helps me create a cocoon where I can tune out the world around me and come into a sweet and soothing place where I can drift off. So my ritual for bedtime is really simple. I love going to bed. I love my waking life, but I love bedtime. There's something so lovely about knowing that I have lived another day on the planet. I have done what I needed to do or what I could do or what I chose to do. And I've opted out of the things I haven't wanted to participate in, hopefully. And my body starts getting tired. It's so interesting. I find sleep to be so mysterious because it's like it calls to me. I don't know that it's always been that way. I certainly, as a child, was someone that always wanted to stay up past my bedtime. Remember how that was golden when you got to stay up past your bedtime? It was like vacation. It was a treat. And I remember having to go to bed before I was tired, and I hated that. And these days, as an adult, with the freedom of choice, I get to choose what works best for me. And my body starts feeling heavy, and I find it harder to focus on whatever I was doing, and it's like sleep meets me. And so by that point, usually I have the comforter and the bed all arranged perfectly. And I crawl into bed and I put in earphones. I wear earphones so that I can listen to a sleep podcast. And I pick an episode. Presently, I'm listening to The Sleepy Bookshelf, and the host, Elizabeth, is reading the Jane Austen novel, Emma. I'm not really a big fan of the book. I don't find Emma to be terribly appealing, but I love Elizabeth's voice, and I just have to focus a little bit on the story. And it's not so engaging that I keep listening, and at some point I drift off. So it definitely serves its purpose. When I don't feel like listening to Emma, I sometimes go back and listen to her episodes where she reads Pride and Prejudice. I also listen to this podcast, so I enjoy my own podcast to help me fall asleep as well. And there's something about hearing a sweet, kind, gentle voice that is just off in the background somewhere that helps build a bridge between my waking world and that beautiful time of sleep. And that is why I have created this podcast for you. So there's two parts to the podcast. The first part is the one that we're in. And this is where I share with you a little bit and I bring in the angels. So there's lots of goodness for you here. And the second part is Storytime, where I read to you or I share with you stories from my life, or we flip through an old magazine. And that's usually about 40 minutes. So in all, the episode runs about 60 minutes. Because as a listener, that's my preference. There are some lovely podcasts out there, but their episodes are only 20 minutes long. And that makes me anxious because I may fall asleep in 20 minutes, but if I don't and I'm still awake, that triggers my stuff of, oh no, now I have to pick another podcast and I'm still awake. And I don't know about you, but I hate that feeling of really wanting to be asleep, but being awake and being aware that I am awake if I do not want to be. So I give you 60 minutes. My hope is 60 minutes works for you. And if you are someone who takes longer than 60 minutes, you can set up a playlist. Most apps will let you do that. I know iTunes does and others do. So you can pick which episodes you want to have play in order. And my episodes, there's no loud noises at the beginning. So if you daisy chain the episodes, it shouldn't interrupt your sleep. I do this on purpose. So there's a continuity of audio. So you can always play more than one episode. I believe this is my 164th episode. That's a lot. And so you have lots to choose from. So I invite you to cozy on up and snuggle on in whatever way works best for you. I feel so much love pouring through for you in this moment. And my hope is this love flows to you in a way that you can feel it as well. It's one of the things I love so much about the angels is they are able to magnify divine love, so it is easier for us to access it in our physical world reality. So I invite you to take a nice deep breath in and out. And I'm going to call the angels in to be with us. They are already here, but I love sharing this ritual with you. So let's take another deep breath in as we gently call ourselves forward into the heart of God. And beautiful angels on high, I rejoice in the opportunity to come together with you in service to each of our beloveds who will hear this message. Angels, I ask that you infuse this broadcast with waves of love, with healing light, with inspiration, with compassion, and with soothing, restful vibrations. I ask that you help co-create a sweet, lovely space where our dear ones here can come into a graceful expanse of rest. The kind of rest that nourishes and replenishes, that helps us to reset, so that when the time comes to awaken to the new day, that we can experience the new day with lightness of spirit. So just take a beautiful deep breath in, my friends, and release. And the angels want you to know that you have done enough for this day. And that they are so deeply grateful for the gift of you. You are a source of love in this world, whether you know it or not. You are someone who carries hope in your heart, and you have a gift for seeing the best in others. You are someone who feels the world through your heart, and it allows you to have empathy for others. And the angels say thank you for this. It is through your empathy that more love flows into this realm. It may not seem like a lot. It may not seem like enough. But it is more than you know, more than you realize. So take a breath in and release. And the angels rejoice in the opportunity to love upon you now. You are a blessing in this world. You are one who cares deeply You are a beautiful, creative spirit. You are a big, bright soul. And just breathe and allow yourself to open to the joy and the vibrancy of your authentic spirit. You know, there are different aspects of self. Quite often in our day-to-day life, we focus on our personality self. I call my personality self my earth girl. She's the one who gets overwhelmed and annoyed and upset. And so you should know that about me, that even though I do this work with the angels, I still have a very human experience of life as well. And then there is the timeless, wise, greater expanse of all that we are. Some people call this the soul self, or the higher self, or the authentic self. My guides call it the greater expanse of all that you are. It's a lot of words, but when they say that phrase, I feel the expansiveness of it. So I invite you to call in the greater expanse of all that you are, to call in your divine, beautiful, wise self. And feel the true beauty of your spirit beyond this time and space. And breathe, and while you do, the angels are helping to clear your physical body and your light body of anything that is not yours and anything that does not serve you. And even as I speak these words, the angels are showing me that they are clearing energy, especially around your back. So if you've been feeling any tightness in your shoulders or upper back or lower back, your angels are bringing you calming, healing energy now. So just release and let go of anything that you suspect you've been holding in your body, any burdens or fears. Just lifting your heart up to the light and allowing the angels to lift the heaviness from you. And just continue to breathe in the goodness. And your angels are helping to bring you energies to help you rest and sleep. And you just breathe and receive. And if you have prayers or intentions that you would like to share with the angels, we invite you to bring them into your heart. You have permission to ask for help. You are not distracting them from anything more important because there is an abundance of love and support in this realm. So let your angels know how they can support you and help you. Allow the room that you are in to be filled with their love. And this love can expand throughout your home, throughout your life. And you don't have to expand this love. The angels will do it for you. And this love travels to all that you love. And you just breathe and allow the light to be the light and replenish you. And so, my beautiful one, you just rest and drift off whenever you feel that wave of sleep coming to you. And while you do, your angels will be with you, taking good care of you. And I'm going to tell you a story and read to you for a little while. So for story time in this episode, I'm going to take us back into the world of Marshall Fields and Company. And I'm going to read to you from the book Marshall Field and Company, The Life Story of Great Concern, that was published by the Dry Goods Economist in 1922. It's an interesting title because it says The Life Story of Great Concern. And in this day and age, we think concern means, there's a problem. But I don't know that that's what they're referring to. I think they're saying the life story of great meaning. Because Marshall Field and Company, that was founded by Marshall Field, the man, and then his legacy was continued by others, including John G. Shedd, who helped fund the Shedd Aquarium for the city of Chicago. That Marshall Field and Company, if you've been listening to the podcast, you've heard me share about it before. But in case you're new to this grand department store that no longer exists, it was purchased by Macy's, and now all the Marshall Field stores were converted to Macy's years ago. But growing up in Chicago, Marshall Fields was a grand department store. One of its philosophies was give the lady what she wants. It was very much based in high quality goods, pleasing the customer, so excellent customer service, and a really beautiful high-end shopping experience. So for me, growing up, going to Marshall Fields always was something special, and especially going to their flagship store in downtown Chicago. As a little girl, I remember taking the train with my mom and my grandmother and my sister. I don't know if my brother came with it in those days. Probably so, but I don't remember that part. And back then you would dress up to go downtown. So I remember trips to Marshall Fields usually meant party socks, which, if you were a little girl in that era, meant those white socks where you flipped down the top and there was lace around the ankle, usually a pair of Mary Janes, and my little girl pocketbook. And we would go downtown and go to Marshall Fields. And it was always such a wonderful experience. And then there was also a Marshall Fields in Skokie in the suburb where I grew up. And we would go to Marshall Fields when you needed something special. Like for regular work clothes or school clothes, you went to Montgomery Ward's or Sears or J.C. Penney's. But when you needed a really nice dress or a lovely wedding gift, you went to Marshall Fields. And their corporate branding was this dark green color with the Marshall Fields logo in script in gold. So whenever that forest green box appeared, you knew something good was about to happen. And Marshall Fields was also known for their Frango mints, which was a hostess gift almost every household gave or received throughout the year. They were these delicious, they still exist, Macy's makes them, but they're delicious mint meltaways covered in chocolate. So Frango mints is also part of the taste profile of my childhood and of the Chicago area. So one of the things that I find so fascinating about this time in 1922 and in the decades right before that, it's a time of the industrialization of creating products. So the mass production of clothing, of textiles, of canned food, that in some ways this was new, and it helped bring greater stability to the supply chain and to the availability of options for consumers. It also created a lot of jobs for people. Another development that Marshall Fields brought to department stores is the production, distribution, and the display of merchandise. It really changed the way the industry approached their inventory, their production, and the way they displayed everything, not only wholesale, but ultimately to the consumer. So we're going to be reading Chapter 18, Production and Distribution Policies Exemplified. One obtains quite a vivid impression of the varied activities of Marshall Field and Company's wholesale branch, as well as its modern ways of doing business, on stepping into the carpeted and rather richly furnished drapery section. Different indeed from the old-time wholesale house where one would see goods piled up on the counter in bolts, and where the customer was apt to be shown goods only in that form. There are two ideas dominant in the showing of merchandise in this department. One is speed, so as to avoid the loss of the customer's time. The other is to present the goods in such a way that they will afford to the customer decidedly accurate conceptions and suggestions as to how goods may be selected with a view to fitting him out with a complete scheme for any kind of room. With the former end in view, there have been designed and made sloping top fixtures. On these desk-like affairs are laid the large sample cards of creotones and other printed cotton draperies. 3 different cards can be placed as to be visible at one time. The customer can look at the card after card without effort or tiring, and the cards can be removed and others substituted in a twinkling. It is much less laborious to the customer than when the cards are laid flat on a table. We know how it works because we tried it. The other idea is carried out by means of racks with rounded tops covered with velour, so that the goods draped over them will not slip or slide off. Over these will be laid the material for the window drape, the valance, a fabric suggesting the wallpaper, a velvet or tapestry for the chair cover or for the davenport, and another fabric suitable for a pillow or soft cushion. And just so you know, davenport is another word for couch or sofa. My grandmother used to say davenport. That's why I know that. Makes me think of her, and that makes me happy. For good measure, the salesman may throw in a silk suitable for the lampshade. Incidentally, electric lamps with the current turned on and with silk shades are among the equipment of this truly attractive as well as remarkable wholesale department. In half a minute, the salesman will show you a complete scheme for a living room, a chamber, or a lady's boudoir. Oh, to live in a time that we would get to have our own boudoir. That just sounds so lovely. I just see visions of pink satin and velvet and cushions. I don't know if that's what it really looked like. That's what I'm seeing, though, in my mind's eye. And all the fabrics thus brought together and displayed will harmonize with each other, the many-colored designs with the plain-colored material, the velvet with the silk, and so on. The exact shade of the plain-colored goods will be found in the design of the fancy fabric, because each of them has been designed, produced, or selected with due regard to the other, and the two or more have been worked out together. This is one of several Marshall Field and Company departments in which constant effort is made to originate and produce the most novel and beautiful designs in all of the various fabrics. Whether the design be woven or printed, hand-blocked printing is freely employed, and as is well known, the colors and effects thus obtained are apt to be deeper in tone and more characteristic than those which result from the use of engraved rollers and the printing machine. This section does business with a wide variety of distributors on a large scale. It supplies the high-class home decorators as well as department stores. It has among its customers hotels and theaters, and it supplies material to other departments of the wholesale branch, notably the one which manufactures and distributes fine upholstered furniture. This draperies department, moreover, summarizes and brings out in an exceptionally marked degree certain of the leading policies of the firm. One of these is the continuous effort visible in every department to create, produce, and distribute merchandise that will in every way fulfill the purpose for which merchandise of that kind is manufactured and consumed. Another is to ensure the merchandise being the best in every way, weave, design, color, or whatever, all the way from the selection of the raw material down to the put-up of the goods for sale. A third policy is to lay the goods before the customer in such a way that he is made to fully understand and realize their good points, and is thus placed in a position intelligently and accurately to pass on this knowledge to his own customers. And if you ask for a fourth policy, here it is: to show the goods in fitting surroundings, with equipment and other aids that made the merchandise look as it will and as it should, both in the well-conducted retail store and in the home of the ultimate consumer. The whole process is educative, easier for me to say. The whole process is educative to the customer of the firm. They have the strongest possible chance to see that the merchandise is more than just something to put in stock and turn over to the people who ask for it. They learn also that price is not the prime factor, because they ascertain by experience that Marshall Field and Company's lines of quality merchandise sell on their own merit more quickly than merchandise at a lower price that is not quite so desirable or attractive. Another notable example of the display methods adopted by the wholesale division of Marshall Field and Company business is presented in the blanket department. Here the goods shown, because of their bulky nature, are confined to samples. Stock is carried in one of the firm's several warehouses, and therefrom goods are shipped and billed. The blanket department, then, is a carpeted space about 55 by 60 feet, walled in with lighted glass-fronted shelving, over which are displayed cases also brilliantly illuminated. Thus the goods are shown to the best advantage, and the sample blankets can readily be removed and laid on the table for inspection by the consumer. In this department, too, are central fixtures with drawers, in which are kept the outing flannels which, like the blankets, are made by the firm's North Carolina mills. Another mighty striking display, while we are on the subject, is one in the lining department, wherein showcases are seen the brilliant colors and rich designs of satines and other weaves got up for the garment manufacturers as well as for the retail trade. Again, in the women's coat, suit, and dress department, and in the infants and children's goods sections, the merchandise is handled in such a way that it looks much as if it were on sale in a first-class retail store. The difference is, however, that in these wholesale sections, each garment or other article displayed is only a sample. Close approximation to the appearance of a well-conducted retail establishment is also presented by the type of fixtures employed as well as the carpeted floor in several of the departments, especially those to which reference has just been made. One of the methods which deserves special mention was brought to our attention in the knit underwear department. The roadmen were instructed to report in writing all complaints made as to their merchandise. Twice a year, the roadmen for department are brought together, and these criticisms and all other appropriate matters are discussed. In addition, the roadmen are given information as to competing lines so that they can talk their own goods more intelligently. Also, they are instructed as to matters of which their merchant customers need to be made aware of, so that the salesman may be in a position to give worthwhile advice as to turnover, selling cost, and various other points that are of vital interest to the merchants to whom they sell. Such conferences last several days. In the knit underwear lines developed by the firm under their brand, there has been a constant endeavor to improve the merchandise. In the early days, the garments were tried on hundreds of different figures so as to find out defects or see where betterments could be effected. The idea of the importance of fit and serviceability is impressed on the retailer by the firm's roadmen. In particular, care is taken to explain the features of the goods to salespeople that have recently been taken on in the retail store. One of the lines of merchandise for which Marshall Field and Company have long been celebrated is gloves. The production is supervised through the firm's Paris organization. In addition to distribution among its customers, the wholesale supplies a large percentage of the glove needs of the Marshall Field and Company retail store. In the case of fabric gloves also, the firm are insistent on keeping their sources of supply in reliable hands. The same is true in regard to hosiery, of which Marshall Field and Company are large distributors. Each line, be it lisle or silk or fiber silk or wool, comes from the same sources year after year, ensuring the same standard of quality in the respective lines. In these two departments, gloves and hosiery, which adjoin each other, the fixtures, as in other sections, are designed to make buying easy and save the customer's time. Samples are shown on narrow stands about 4 feet high, the tops of which slope on each side, on the order of a rather high-pitched roof. Thus the samples are in plain sight, and in the case of hosiery, the demand for which from the house customers is very great on certain days of the week, the sizes in stock are marked on the ticket. As a result, the customer can almost make up his own order. One of the many strong departments in the wholesale is that of the fancy cotton and silk and cotton fabrics, including dress goods, skirtings and shirtings, in woven and printed patterns, percales, cotton, chalets, and other wash goods. These are converted by the house, the gray goods being obtained from select mills, and the department constantly striving to develop the most attractive and novel patterns. It was particularly interesting during a visit to this department in midsummer to discuss with its head the styles, designs, and fabrics that would probably be in best demand for the spring of 1922 and note the keen insight into what effects demand for a certain pattern or weave. In this department, too, as in others, the effort was to produce the best possible article to have the work done where one could be surest of getting the best, making the price question secondary to the desirability and fitness of the merchandise. The same is true of the other dress fabric departments, including the wool and worsted section and the gingham sections. The woolens and worsteds are made exclusively for the firm. The ginghams are produced in the firm's mills in North Carolina. In these, every attention is given to getting the best possible effect in patterns by means of carefully bleaching of the white yarns and selection of the best dyes for the colored warps and fillings. Many of the plaid patterns are woven on 5 and 6 box looms, which means that the number of colors entering into the pattern is decidedly above average. The firm's mills in North Carolina and Virginia will form the subject of a subsequent chapter. In the silk department, supplies are obtained not only from the firm's own silk mill and other domestic mills, but at this time the buyers are making trips to both France and the Orient. The purpose is to carry such a range of qualities and weaves that the average retailer can look to Marshall Field and Company for at least the greater part of its silk needs. The next chapter talks about the insistence on quality in merchandise. To Marshall Field and Company's insistence on quality in their merchandise, their unremitting efforts to see how good and not how cheap the goods could be made, is attributed in a large degree this high position which the house has attained and held. And certainly that was part of the mystique when I grew up with Marshall Fields, is you went to Marshall Fields for really good quality. Whatever it was they carried, whether it was bedding or pots and pans or having a lunch in one of their cafes or clothing, it was good quality. So I'll continue. To get a clear idea of how consistently this policy had been adhered to and carried out, one needs to visit the firm's wholesale institution and not only examine the merchandise, but talk with the merchandise managers and merchandise department heads. Time and time again, one will be struck by the comments made to these gentlemen as to how this improvement was made, what steps were taken to get that line of goods just a little better, or a great deal better, it may be, how designs originated in the department are furnished to one manufacturer, or how material of the essential character is supplied to another. Needless to say, the efforts to produce merchandise that is distinctive, beautiful, artistic, and reliable are just as constant and unremitting in connection with the other wares that the firm's own factories or other plants turn out. In the case of Oriental rugs, for example, these are not only brought by Marshall Field and Company's buyers who visit India, Persia, and China for the purpose. The designs for rugs are sent over or taken to the makers. In addition to this, the rugs are made according to Marshall Field and Company's specifications. The nap, for instance, must be of a certain length, considerably longer than that of the stock rug. These specifications and requirements can be enforced because in these days Oriental rugs are made even in the undeveloped countries on the factory system. There is no operation of machinery, but the weavers work in a large shed under the direction of their employer. One such factory in Amritsar, British India, so again, this was while India was still under colonial rule, has in operation 300 looms, or to speak more accurately, frames on which the warps are stretched and at which the rug makers work. In order to make sure of getting the best goods and designs that can be produced, both the buyer for the wholesale and the buyer for the retail visit the Orient at suitable intervals. And I just have to say, I keep tripping over the way they're talking about the Orient, because certainly that is not the language we use today. We would say Asia. So they visit Asia at suitable intervals, and these department heads are accompanied by one or another of their immediate associates. Just to show how original are the ideas conceived by these men and how undeterred they are by any difficulties that may be involved in carrying out their conceptions, take the case of a rug recently made to order in China. This rug is of a large size, 12 by 14 feet, and is of extraordinarily close and even weave. The quality is as fine as it is possible to produce. Whereas the best regular grade of Chinese rug has 100 strings to the foot, this llama rug, as it is called, has 120 strings to the foot. The chief feature about it, however, is the design, which includes 150 figures copied from the idols in a Buddhist temple in Peking, which now we would say Beijing. It actually says Pekin, so maybe it's a different city, Pekin. I will tell you, just as an aside, one of the difficulties I have in reading articles written during this time period is they can be extremely racist. They can use terms and concepts that are not at all in alignment with the way we think now. Thankfully, we have evolved. So I try to clean this up when I read this to you. I just have to acknowledge that it exists. So I just think it's interesting, though, to hear how they would bring these goods into wholesale and retail stores so that consumers could have them. So the Marshall Field and Company buyers visited the temple, and the thought occurred to one of them what a wonderful thing it would be to have this picture that we see worked into a rug. The idea was laid before the most skillful rug makers in China. At first they declared it could not be done. They were prevailed on to try, however, and after a year's labor the rug was produced. The colors are beautifully harmonized. Figures of the gods and goddesses are reproduced with rare fidelity, and altogether the rug makes a showpiece that will unquestionably become famous all over the world. So they're talking about making brushes. I'm going to skip over that part. And now they're talking about making imitation ivory. Thank goodness it's imitation ivory. It uses pyroxylin goods, Pyroxylin, or so-called imitation ivory, a mirror of attractive shape which has become popular today because of its adoption by other makers. As another example of how the firm works for the improvement of domestic merchandise, one may cite an imitation ivory container for a powder puff. Unlike the ordinary article, this container is polished on the inside. A small matter, perhaps, but it makes the container look much more attractive, and furthermore, it is another example of the dogged persistence of field folks when they go after something. For in this case, as in others, the manufacturer said it could not be done. In the development of numerous lines of merchandise, Marshall Field and Company Wholesale have the advantage of being able to draw the needed materials from their own stocks, as well as the aid of their own factories or workrooms. In the furniture department, one may see examples of this in upholstered chairs and davenports of the highest as well as the medium grades. In one expensive suite, the hand-blocked printed mohair is drawn from the drapery department. The bases, by the way, are made in the firm's factory from designs developed in the furniture department itself. Similarly, there is wicker furniture showing marked originality in shape and coloring devised by men in the department and produced under their direction, while the upholstering of a seat and back is done in fabrics which also came from the wholesale drapery section. Furniture that is not upholstered, such as dining room suites, is made for the firm from their own special designs. As an example of how the house takes steps to overcome promptly any hitch that may arise in connection with the supply of any kind of merchandise, one may cite the following. During the war, as many will recall, the use of metal for other than war purposes was forbidden by the War Industries Board. This put a stop to the making of metal smoking seats, among other things. The department of Marshall Field and Company, which handled such sets, went to work, therefore, to produce the stands in mahogany. Then came the problem of producing a glass ash receiver which should have a circular flange, so as to set properly in the place provided for it at the top of the stand. This was finally accomplished, and the manufacture and sale of the stands went merrily on, a godsend, no doubt, to thousands of merchants who had been wondering how they were going to supply the demands of their public for smoking sets. Then the department went further. They took up the manufacture of lamps and candlesticks in mahogany, and that led them still farther. They began to make these articles in polychrome and also in ivory enamel finish. I hope they're talking about the fake ivory here. And having the lamps, why not make the shades? The more so as the silk or other fabric necessary could be obtained from other departments right in the house. So now the customer in the Marshall Field and Company Wholesale can supply his needs for lamps and shades of the highest class and most attractive character. He can even get these in extraordinarily novel forms. For example, the idea suggested itself to someone in the department, why not use a lampshade of rich velvet brocade, the figure in velvet and the ground in silk? This was made up with suitable fringe and silk ruching, and lo and behold, there was a shade of entirely novel style that would grace any parlor or drawing room. Another product of this same workroom is bookends in a variety of designs. Still another is the long-handled decorative mirror, which in many houses find a place on the hall rack for the use of callers. Other lines of merchandise made from Marshall Field and Company designs are china and silverware. For china, designs are sent to Japan and to Holland. Domestic manufacturers are shown that they can approximate the finest imported ware. We were shown, for example, a vase that might have come from Copenhagen but was made in the U.S. In the designing of silverware, models are first made in one of the firm's workrooms in the retail store, and the design embodied therein is made up by the manufacturer. The old conception of a wholesale house was more or less to the effect that it handled goods of a quality not higher than medium and possibly lower. Anyone who needs to have this idea dispelled as regards Marshall Field and Company may have the operation performed via visit to many departments, but perhaps in none more readily or strikingly than in the jewelry. As a matter of fact, it ought to have been clear to readers of this story long ago that Marshall Field and Company Wholesale is different in its methods and in the character of its merchandise. Still, if any new light on the subject is needed, it bursts upon one in a dazzling way when one is shown diamond pins in platinum that retail for the tidy sum of $1,500, or watch movements no thicker than a silver dollar, hardly that, indeed, and which are sold in platinum cases for some $300. Then, too, there are women's wristwatches in oval shapes with the movement also oval instead of round. Or if the dealer is looking for something to sell for the lowly sum of $5, he may be shown what the department head describes as the Ford of the watch business, a watch made in Switzerland and for the devising and production of which the firm's office in St. Gall was largely responsible. The movement is of the simplest possible design, compatible with accuracy and durability. The dial and case are as beautiful in design and form as those of watches of the most expensive type. The crystal ring and the back are attached by ingenious devices that are perfectly effective and yet tend to save labor. This jewelry department and its merchandise afford evidence not only of the kind of goods the house handles, but also of the wide diversity of its trade. A few department stores handle jewelry that sells for the highest prices above mentioned. A few do, yes, but they are the rare exceptions. So in this case, as is that of certain other departments' furniture, for example, it is the specialty stores that compose the greatest bulk of its customers. In connection with the doll department, improvements in the character of the merchandise have been made. The dolls are dressed in materials supplied by Marshall Field and Company fabric departments, and care has been taken to see that these dresses are better made and trimmed with better materials than the ordinary run of such merchandise. Sorry about that if you heard that. There's a bird outside my window making some noise or singing a song. There is a study devoted also to the doll's hair. The wigs are made of the best material. In many cases, the dolls are shown with the hair in 2 braids. For toy tableware, dishes, etc., the firm supplies the manufacturers with special drawings and other designs, these drawings being forwarded to the potteries and reproduced especially for Marshall Fields and Company. Even in the matter of Christmas tree ornaments, the patterns are specially made for the firm. Thus, their assortment contains many original designs. In children's embroidery or needlework, the goods are supplied by Marshall Field and Company's own factory located at Monticello, Indiana. And that brings us to the end of that chapter. Interesting insight to how Marshall Field's wholesale department, how they took their demand for high quality, converted that into wholesale so that now these products would be available to other retailers. So interesting perspective, and perhaps even boring enough that you are now asleep. And if you're not, there are a lot more episodes here to keep you company. So, my beautiful friends, I wish you a good rest. I am so deeply grateful for you. I love you, and thank you so much for the opportunity to keep you company.